my dad is the great patriot, but long before you knew him, he's always been my hero. And he's always been there. I did have to call him at 3 o'clock in the morning because he was always busy talking to other people, and I knew 3 o'clock in the morning was my time. No one else called. And if you did, I'll find you. But it's not okay. It's my time. Yesterday I was doing an interview. My sister said something. She said, freedom isn't just give you the right to do whatever you want. Freedom gives you the ability to do what you ought. We have inherited this great nation from people who have paid the price with blood. And because we have become complacent and distracted, we have let all these freedoms just slip through our fingers because we're lazy, we don't want to do the work, and we want pretend false securities. So you can list almost all the problems our country is facing because we as American people decided that we didn't want to put in that much work. We didn't want to research to find out who the best candidate was. We didn't want to maybe run ourselves because that's a lot of work and I have a life. I'm going to read a quote my dad often quoted. And I usually just try to quote it, but I always butcher it, so this time I wrote it down. Because the fight for freedom is God's fight, for free agency is an eternal principle. It existed before this world was formed. It will exist forever. Some men may succeed in denying some aspects of this God-given freedom to their fellow men, but their success is temporary. Freedom is a law of God, an eternal law, and like any of God's laws, men cannot break it with impunity. They can only break themselves upon it. So when a man stands for freedom, he stands with God. And as long as he stands for freedom, he stands with God. Therefore, any man will be eternally vindicated and rewarded who stands for freedom. That was by Ezra F. Benson. And there was a point that my dad felt alone. He was so afraid that what he was standing for would be for naught. He has 11 children, 19 grandchildren, 3 on the way. He never found out about the last one. My sister just barely told us. He had a lot to live for, but he knew that all the years he spent teaching his children would be for nothing if he didn't stand for what he believed in. So even though he lost a father that day, America gained a martyr that we can rally behind. He has watered the tree of liberty with his blood, and I hope to God that he's the only one that has to do it for America to open their eyes. At times I feel bad because so much attention is on my dad, and he would have been so embarrassed, for lack of a better word, for having all this attention on him, because what he was doing was what any American should do. And right now we have so many political prisoners being held captive in solitary confinement. You do not hold people in solitary confinement unless they have already killed people, are on death row. And what have they done? What have they done? They went out to the boonies. They went out to the boonies away from population and sat in a building. And they didn't just sit. They upgraded, they upkept, they built up stuff that the government should have been doing, but they didn't. And they're the ones being held in prison. 23 hours a day, they are in a dark cell. And for anyone that loves freedom, or is a rancher, feeling the wind on your face and an open sky, I mean, this city is oppressive to me, just because it's so crowded. I'm used to wide open spaces. And so for someone that is like me to be stuck in a cell 23 hours a day, out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out. My dad put his life on the line, even though he could have stayed under the radar, to go stand up for a neighbor. Why? Because if we just ignore those around us because we're not the one in direct fire right now, who's going to stand for us when we do become under direct fire? You cannot, under good conscience, ignore those in need and continue your life. If you think that you will not be held accountable one day for ignoring those in need, you are truly mistaken. I lost a father because laws and things that should have been shot down years ago were not. And so on January 26th, the day before my father's 55th birthday, he was shot down with his hands in the air. And what part of me is upset with those that were complacent and let it get this bad. I am so eternally grateful for those that are standing now. My dad's book, I was reading one of the quotes from it. And I won't tell you what happens in the book, but some of my dad's words were, digging a grave for a fallen loved one is the last service that can be rendered in this world. My family has a tradition. We have our own graveyard, and you're not allowed to use any machinery to dig the grave. The men go out in the morning before it's time to bury them, and they hand dig the grave. I had my brother-in-law's brother hand build his casket the week after he died, and it was beautiful. My dad wanted a simple pine box. We upgraded it a little bit, and we were able to on Friday share him with the world, and then on Saturday we were able to finally have our own time. And as each of us got to smoke, the grandchildren played around the casket. My son was throwing dirt on top, and I'm like, oh dear. But you know, my dad would have had it any other way. And when it was all done, we dusted off the dirt, we got our hands and knees and cleared it out. And us as daughters had a chance to slowly bury him. And it was still and real to me. We had a last second to throw in anything that was important to us that we wanted to throw in with him. My brother is hard of hearing, and my dad, whenever he waved goodbye, would do the I love you. He just waved goodbye like this. My brother, he wrote a side with I love you. And I had nothing. I was so distraught because I'm like, the shirt I was wearing didn't have any meaning, and I, couldn't very well just throw my shirt in the casket. And I just had nothing, and I was freaking out, and I was like, husband, the only thing meaningful I have on me is my wedding ring. So I did throw that in the casket. I got a new one, so we're okay. But, my dad's fight for freedom is not over. I feel like it was almost like a hydra, like those mythical creatures where if you chop off one head, more come back. My dad had 11 kids. He chopped off one. There was 11 of us and my mom. She's a dynamite gal. I want to read another quote from my dad. It says, majority rule must stop at our unalienable, pure and our inalienable rights. Pure democratic rule is a terrible thing without morality. It is like two wolves and a lamb voting what's for dinner.
Yep.
We are given our inalienable of the words in that document. And when it says, your rights shall not be infringed on, infringe means not touched at all. You are able to bear arms however you like, according to the Constitution. You are able to speak out, however, according to the Constitution. Each of my siblings found kind of their role. None of us can replace our father. Mine is to show the power of the one. I want each of you to know that you are powerful beyond measure. Your voice counts because when one person stands, others stand with you. And even if you are to stand alone, you still stand with God. And what more do you need than our Supreme Creator standing?
Amen.
Yep.
Right.
I am no longer afraid for myself. My dad was never afraid for himself. He was talking to him before this. We asked, like, what's going on, Dad? Because we are all behind you. And his biggest fear was that his children would be in the crossfire. But in the end, he had faith in God, that God would take care of his children if he did what he was supposed to do. And God has truly taken care of us. I do not have a father to call at 3 a.m. in the morning. But I have a God to call at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Amen.